in a couple years,
That's
if your tree dies, it's probably because you forgot to take that off.
Fruit trees are an enormous investment, both financially when we're buying the trees, but also time-wise, because it could be 7 years between the day we plant our tree and the day we actually get fruit off that tree. So many people plant their trees, wait that 7 years, only to realize they've made a huge mistake. I've been gardening for 12 years. I have planted my fair share of fruit trees and had my fair share of mistakes. But now that we're here, settled on our forever farm, I want to make sure that I'm setting myself up for long-term success with every single thing that I put in the ground. To that end, I've invited my friend Daniel, who has been an arborist and tree specialist for 6 years, to tell me what I'm doing wrong before things get even worse. Daniel, hi, hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming to solve all the world's problems. I have several different trees we want to look at. Some that are little like this and some that are very well established. And I was hoping that you can tell me and a few hundred of my friends how to start at this stage when they're freshly planted,
right,
and really take them through to, when we're not 7 years in, finally getting our fruit harvest and our whole tree collapses or whatever.
Right. So to start off with, this guy's been in the ground for 2 years or so? Right?
Yeah, I think I planted this either last year or the year before.
Okay, cool, yeah. Before you do heavy pruning, you do want to have your trees get established because,
Sure.
these leaves are their energy.
This is their solar panel to send the stuff into the roots, right?
Right.
Okay.
And planting a new tree is super difficult, super traumatic for the poor little guys.
Yes.
And this is a perfect stage to address a lot of the issues that will become major headaches 5, 10, 20 years down the road. Essentially what you want with a fruit tree is you want a strong central leader.
Okay.
And you want almost like tiers of lateral branch coming out, like a lower layer, a mid layer, and like a top layer. So it looks like a nice little kind of, even crown. You want short branches that are stocky with lots of lateral branches coming off.
Oh look, a little baby ladybug. I was always so interested by the fact that this is truly what a little baby ladybug looks like. Because how could it then turn into that hard-shelled red little thing? But the thing is, we love ladybugs in the garden. Now that you mention that, actually, that totally makes sense. Here, if we were to have an apple grow on this right now,
right,
I mean, that's going to put a ton of weight on this. And, this far out, of course, that's going to just lop it off the tree.
Exactly. And you might look like, this tree over here has been in the ground longer. But if you have like 20 peaches at an end of a branch that's 2 inches thick,
yeah,
it's going to do the exact same thing. And also, if you look, you want these branches coming off the main stem to be a good ratio to this main stem. You typically want them to be 1/3 of the thickness or thinner.
So if this is the trunk of the tree, the branches that are coming off of it, we want them to be 1/3 or less. So
yep,
looking at these, this one is maybe pushing it. This is maybe a little bit too fat for its own good.
Yeah, I would say that one's too thick, this one's too thick. And then you run into the problem here of where you have 2 leads that are almost exactly the same thickness. And what that is called, it's called a codominant stem. And as that grows, it's gonna push bark between those 2 leads rather than interwoven wood fibers, and it's gonna split in half in a windstorm or once the apples get too heavy. So at this stage, the tree's young enough that taking a significant amount of the canopy isn't gonna cause a lot of damage. It's still young. So what we wanna do is take care of these issues, kind of fix these ratios, and then, be good for a couple years and you'll be able to come back and address it and kind of, do course correction if needed. But for today, we wanna reduce this one, and we essentially wanna choose which one of these leads we want to be the centerpiece, the main lead.
One main tree limb to rule them all. We'll choose one of those to be our very precious thing, and we want to make sure that that one is the one that goes up and down and that one gets the most sunlight possible. This is pretty sparse right now, but trimming it now will set us up for success later, because I have, as you'll see later on, trees that I didn't trim properly that now are in their prime fruit-bearing years and in danger of having huge issues as they get older.
So we'll start with these lower leads. And if you look, these guys are great. They're growing, they're a good ratio to the trunk, and they're growing at 45-degree angle or less. Like, these are textbook great branches. These guys, we're gonna reduce them, and that's called subordination. So essentially we're slowing down their growth so that as the whole tree grows, this rest of the tree is gonna grow at a faster rate than these, and it will fix that ratio hopefully. And again, after a couple years, you can go back, do some course corrections, take a little more there, take a little less there. But what you do is you follow down the stem and you try to find a lateral branch that's about the third of the diameter of the branch you're taking. A lot of rules of thirds, you know. You don't want these to be more than a third. You want this to be at least a third.
So this is one of those things where it's like, Michael Scott, explain it to me like I'm 5. By a lateral branch, you mean like these things that are kind of sticking out, right? Not like this little nub in here.
Right. So this would be considered like an auxiliary bud, essentially. A lateral branch is essentially, yeah, a more substantial growth out of the side of the main lead.
And you said that you want those to be about like at 45-degree angles usually?
That's usually growing from the trunk.
Okay.
If you're looking at it and it's about a 45-degree angle or less, that's a sign that it will be a good healthy attachment in the future. If you look at these co-dominant stems, that's a super tight angle. If one of these were subordinated, it'd still be just an incredibly tight angle. A cute angle is what maybe math people would say.
A cute angle.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, looking at this branch, it has a lot of weight on the end here, and then you go down and there's not a lot of growth. This is probably our best option. You know, this is small, but it counts as a branch. You know, it's about a third of the size and it has some growth there. So I'll go and cut just above that crotch. And then this will, what that does, if you cut back to a lateral branch, is this then takes over the dominant role. And so it helps the tree heal faster and also reduces all those water sprouts. And that's usually not a huge issue for these small trees. Bigger trees, it becomes more of an issue.
And actually, speaking of sprouts and all this stuff, something I did want to ask you is, like, I think the age-old accepted knowledge is that you want to prune your trees in the fall. However, especially somewhere like here where it's really humid, I would imagine that that would open up the tree to all kinds of mold and fungal diseases, and in a time when all of the energy is like kind of going down into the root system and the tree is dormant. I mean, we're obviously in spring. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as fruit production, pruning after the fruit harvest, you know, makes sense. But as far as pruning in the fall when the tree's dormant, the fungus pathogens and things like that, and wood rotting fungus are usually less active, but they're still active. And that's just a longer amount of time that these wounds can remain open and to get a foothold. You know, lots of the most aggressive ones, you know, you think of split gill or even like oyster mushrooms, like they tend to grow well in cold weather. So pruning when it's warm and the tree is actively growing lets the tree heal these small wounds, you know, very quickly, you know, in a matter of months. And it's also good to prune the tree small like this, because then you're not creating big wounds.
Totally, that makes
sense. You know,
sense.
They're able to heal over and compartmentalize a lot faster.
So we want to do this at the beginning instead of having to cut off huge sections of an older established tree later on, because there's just more danger there.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we got this guy. Looking at this one, this is an ideal lateral branch coming off. It's growing directly away from the center of the tree. It's growing at a good angle. That takes a lot of the end weight off, but also gives us a good kind of bottom tier that's pretty equal with this one, and also opens up the sunlight to hit all these other buds and branches on these leads, and the lead that will become our precious will then take off, and those branches will then become kind of the next tier as we grow. But these buds that are exposed to sunlight, they're gonna grow directly towards the sun. So if there's nothing above them, they're just gonna go straight up.
Okay.
So the next year or the year after that, you might have to go and kind of do what we just did and prune those ones back to a lateral branch.
Okay.
But now we come to the decision of which one is our precious.
My precious.
And it's not the one Anna wants.
My precious is right here because it has 4 little precious baby apples growing on it, but it seems that the expert would like to break my heart.
So if you look, it would be fine. At this stage of growth, we can choose either one, but the fruit production is going to take energy away from growing, and since this little guy is struggling, and it's not really struggling, but you know,
well, compared to its friend that was planted at the same time.
We want as much energy to go towards growth rather than fruit production at this point for this little fella.
Totally.
And also, if you look at this other lead back here, it has these really nice, evenly spaced buds that already are kind of turning into branches.
Oh.
And since we just thinned these other leads, when the sun hits those are going to take off and turn into good branches and even more energy for the tree.
Whereas this one has basically none of those, so this one is the one that sadly has got to go.
Yeah.
It has got to go. Get it off there.
And so with this guy, I'm gonna take it all the way back to this bottom lateral bud.
This is like the whole tree, but it's okay.
And this guy might one day be a really nice branch, who knows? And now we have these guys subordinated, these guys are good to go. These are hopefully going to get more sun and grow faster. And then we're left with this top where we need to choose, keep establishing that central leader.
So if it was me, based on what you've just told me, that would mean that we would probably take this and this. Is that right?
Yeah, and I don't think we need to take them all. What I would do is just take a little snip here.
Yep.
And a little snip here, and that should be fine. This guy can then continue to grow straight up and be that strong central lead, which is structurally really strong, gives you that nice branch attachment long term where it will handle loads of apples hopefully. And this is another fun fact, is in your excitement, you want to, some people keep the labels on so they know what it is. In a couple years, if your tree dies, it's probably because you forgot to take that off, if it's still on there, because this can totally girdle a tree. That's something, unfortunately, I deal with a lot, is going and pruning people's trees and they just never took the tags off and the plastic totally girdled the tree.
I love the term girdle right there because, do you know where the term girdle came from? Women used to wear girdles to keep them from having the little muffin top that's absolutely going to develop around that label if we don't take it off. This
now is a great start for this tree. It's a really good starting structure. And again,
my goat would like to thank this tree for its sacrifice. So Daniel, we've got some bigger fish to fry over here. Let's go.
Yes, we do.
All right, Daniel, we've got this plum tree that ironically I planted at the same time as the cherry tree over there, but this one is just for whatever reason really, really thrived. Basically, what we talked about over there has led me to believe that we are already gonna have to get rid of some stuff. I don't actually see a central lead, so we'll have to do something about that. And there are some plums, but again, we're gonna kill our darlings so that we have more darlings later, right?
Right. This has been in the ground for 2 years, 3 years at the most?
3 years.
So looking at that tree we just pruned compared to this tree, this is a good example of why what we did there is so important.
Yeah.
Where all these lower limbs have these really big ratio compared to the trunk. You can already see where these branches are starting to pinch bark between the trunk, which is a really weak union. And as they've grown, they've either shaded out the central lead or forced the central lead to grow in a different direction.
Okay.
If we look here, this is probably the most central branch growing, and as it grows up, it just shoots straight off that way, probably because of these tall branches combined with this peach tree here.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do is we're essentially just gonna choose our central lead, and then since we're looking at this and evaluating the health and it's growing so well, that tells us we can probably take more off and the tree will be fine. However, there's a flip side to that coin where if you prune a healthy, vigorous tree heavily, it's gonna respond by sending up even faster growth. So next year you can anticipate it's gonna be sending up a lot of sprouts, what are called water sprouts, which are basically just thin, super fast growing vertical stems. And then it will just be a matter of knocking those back every year to get back to your established structure.
Okay, let's kill those darlings, my friend.
All right, let's do it. I've been doing tree work for 5 to 6 years, and during that entire time, I've used chainsaws and pruners and all sorts of dangerous equipment every single day, all day. I've never cut myself with a chainsaw. However, I've cut myself with one of these things at least half a dozen times. So, based off of my experience, I recommend always putting on some gloves before using these hand saws.
Great, I love it. Also, it's probably worth mentioning that I have also cut myself with a pull saw more than any other tool.
Well-
Actually, it's like kind of a joke in our furniture classes because we usually cut, like when we're making chairs, we cut the spindles off with the pull saw, and it's literally glue up day that everyone has band-aids all over their hands because it just pops right out and it gets you.
Well, so I'll be like up in a tree and I'll be like cutting a branch and just be like sawing really fast, and then it will like give unexpectedly, and I'll just go and like hit my knee, and I'll leave like just like a trail of like, it looks like a tattoo or something. It's happened a bunch of times. Also, like my pinky, I always manage to just like worry I cut off the tip of my pinky. But anyway, gloves, this guy. So this is gonna be a heavier cut, but it'll be worth it. I'm gonna take this back to this branch here. All right, there we go.
It's like a whole plum tree.
Yeah, beautiful.
Goodbye. So, I mean, I'm not going to ask you to make me feel better about myself right now, but I mean, in not knowing what I didn't know, did I set this tree back in its fruit production? I mean, because essentially it's put in years of growth into stuff that we're now cutting off, right?
With how vigorous this tree is growing and how well it's doing, yeah, we maybe lost a year or two, but what's a year or two? It's
a lot. It's a year of our lives.
Well, plant a bunch more fruit trees, and that way,
good.
You know, the pain will be dispersed.
Great, great, great.
Okay. All right.
What else do we have to do to this poor?
Oh, so much. Well, so taking that was definitely a good call, and I'm reevaluating my decisions. I think we're gonna reestablish this one as a central lead, because it is more central and it's already pretty vigorous. So this is gonna be our new precious that we wanna preserve and protect and help. Everything else is secondary to our precious.
Okay, that's our precious.
All right, there you go.
There goes another whole plum tree.
Take this guy.
Another whole plum tree. This is okay. Oh, you had to clip it right above the plum?
That's what you get when you prune your plum trees bad.
I wish if I had only just become friends with you 3 years sooner.
So I cut this, even though it's a relatively small branch, it was growing very vertically, and you see just how vigorous that is. So
man, that's like a foot of growth. Like, because this is last year's wood, and this is this year's wood.
Yeah. So, you know, having that grow right on the end here, I know by the end of the growing season, that's already going to be shading out some of these interior branches here that we want to grow out and get established.
Cool. Get rid of it.
All right. I think we are good on this tree.
What's happening with this guy? Won't this cause a problem? Or tell me.
So what I did is, you know, if you look at how much we took off here,
like 17 plum trees worth?
Yeah, that's like probably 50% of this tree, which is definitely more than you would normally want to take. Normally, you don't want to take any more than a third.
Okay.
However, with like the state of everything, you know, how the structure was essentially compromised and how fast it's growing, it seemed like it was a safe thing to do. Again, we'll have to watch next year as these branches respond and, you know, kind of
do their thing.
The more aggressive you are, the faster they grow with a lot of fruit trees. And you'll probably be bummed that the tree looks like it's leaning more because of the central lead we chose.
Oh, it does, but actually therein lies my first question that I actually had for you with this tree is how do we stop the lean? But now, having heard everything you've told me about, like, basically the tree's gonna grow to where the light is, I think the next thing we need to do is tackle that bad boy so that we can get some more light to this so it doesn't keep just growing further and further away.
Exactly, and you know, once we get that guy taken care of and with the stuff we've done here, a lot of these interior buds along our precious, they're gonna take off.
Cool.
And hopefully become substantial limbs that will bear fruit and help the overall structure. But yeah, this is kind of like emergency situation.
Due to my former neglect of this tree.
Right.
Unintentional, because I actually have trimmed these trees, but therein lies the thing, is that like I didn't really know what I was doing. I was making sure that I was making a beautiful little coif for visual purposes, but not understanding exactly what we were trying to do.
And the thing is, as things progress with this understanding, you can still achieve that perfect little coif or whatever you want to call it. But the structure will be established so that, you have the different kind of tiers. And, plant variety and plant genetics play a big role as well, where sometimes the branches they send up just tend to be more vertical on some trees, but the lighting is usually the biggest factor where, the branches are going to grow towards the light. If there's a branch above it, it'll grow horizontal towards the light, but if there's light directly above, it'll grow straight up.
All right, Daniel, I want to show you my pride and joy here. This peach tree, I just want you to know, I planted this peach tree 3 years ago. This is year 4 for her.
Wow.
I planted her at the same time as all the others, and last year I picked 80 delicious edible peaches off of her. But I have a feeling that we're about to give her a summer haircut.
Yeah, I have bad news for you. Your tree's doomed. Just kidding.
You better not. We're gonna fix it. We gotta fix it. I mean,
What do you have going on here? What is this?
I told you, I'm a little OCD and it was growing crooked, and I imagine it's probably going to damage the bark long term if we leave it on. So should we get that off?
Yeah, so it's a complete waste of time and also damaging the bark.
Cool, love
But
that.
essentially, no, I get what you're trying to do, but
you just were doing it wrong.
you're just doing it wrong.
That's okay.
But
so
when
should
you
I take it off while you explain to me?
Yeah,
Okay.
when you have a support like that with the trees are constantly responding to their environment, whether it's the light, the wind, shade, all of that stuff. So, lots of people when they plant new trees, they'll go and they'll stake it so it won't move at all in the wind. But what that ends up doing is the tree isn't responding to the wind. So the second they take away those stakes, the tree will either blow over or break.
Yeah.
So being able to respond to their environment is essential for a healthy tree. And so getting support like that, it's probably doing the opposite of what you want by putting a bunch of extra, strength on this side where it's getting pulled towards.
Sure.
And this side where, it's actually leaning and needs strength, it's probably neglecting. And it's short-term enough that it's not a huge issue.
Yeah, I only just put this on a few weeks ago.
But that's essentially what happens when you will stake a tree, is it won't respond to its environment, it will respond to the stakes. And so that way, when you take the stakes off, it won't be prepared for the conditions it's living in, or you'll keep the stakes on too long and it will end up damaging or killing the tree.
Wow. So I actually think that's probably pretty huge, because a lot of people will stake their trees between, two things when they're first planting them. And in so doing, I mean, we live in a really windy spot. So, if the tree doesn't have its own natural ability, like if it's not encouraged to send down deep roots, send out wide roots that'll help it to withstand that wind, then it makes total sense that it would just blow right over.
Yeah. And so, granted, if you live in a windy area and you plant a new tree, it keeps blowing over, you got to fix that. So if you're going to stake a tree, you want to have enough slack in the stake so that the tree can move and respond to the wind, but that the stake and rope will catch the tree before it goes too far. And that way it will respond to its environment, and you'll be able to take that stake material away once the tree's established after a year or two, hopefully.
All right, so aside from my stake woes, what else do we need to do to this little baby?
So you said it's been here for 3 years.
Yeah, isn't
It's
this incredible?
grown like crazy, a super healthy tree, and you already took quite a few limbs off this spring, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, I took one major limb right here
Yeah.
and here, because they were just, at least I knew that much.
Right.
Right.
So since you already pruned some from this tree this year, and it is doing really well, so we'll probably be able to take quite a bit off. But we want it to probably not be as aggressive as we were with the other tree.
Because I've already taken a big chunk.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what we'll do in this is probably go in stages. And also, kind of like that last tree, this one, it's really hard to find something that would work as a central lead. I've looked, and honestly, there's no clear candidates. So mostly what we'll be doing today is reducing some of these limbs back, just so there isn't so much leverage in the future as that fruit grows and matures.
Okay.
Next year, you might be able to take a little bit more and a little bit more, reading the tree and seeing how much it's growing, how it's responding. Lots of times you can tell if you take off too much, because the following year it will send up, like we were talking about that one, just really aggressive sprouts, or it'll start sprouting from the base more and stuff like that. That's usually a sign that you were pretty heavy-handed.
Okay.
Which, as long as you're anticipating it, you can
Catch up with
adjust
it, yeah.
accordingly, yeah. But for this guy today, we just want to keep it from breaking, you know, once you get that plentiful peach harvest.
Because I can already see quite a few peaches on here.
Right.
When we're planting fruit trees, we have the initial cost of the tree. And of course, if we spend more money, we can get a more established tree that's going to get us closer to an eventual fruit harvest. But with this tree in particular, because it's already producing fruit, it's that much more precious to me. I have 4 years invested in the fruit that's going to come off of this tree. But because I didn't really know what I was doing when I was first planting it and first pruning it, there is a genuine concern, especially after talking to Daniel about how fruit trees grow and how they should be pruned, about the fruit actually weighing down the branches at the end, creating leverage that would actually split this tree apart. And after putting 3 to 4 years into this tree, the thought of it splitting due to the weight of the fruit and then becoming a useless tree and having to start all over again is yucky. All right, well, you can see already one of the issues that we have, which is rats attacking the tree. Also, you can just watch me struggle pulling this out, and
I want to try pulling it out
well,
now.
I already loosened it.
Yeah.
I have massively loosened it already, so if he's able to get it out, it's due to my own strength, not his.
You broke it.
Good.
I think it's stuck on a root. I think if you try to pull it out with a tractor, it's going to pull the tree out.
No. That is really strange, though, because it does seem like it should come out. Forget it. We'll do that later. All right.
We're going to spend the rest of the evening trying to get this thing out.
Yes.
That Anne put there for no reason.
Well, that's most of what my entire life is undoing things that seemed like a good idea at the time.
When I am looking at reducing limbs that are really heavy, I will pick the strongest, most central lead and reduce that back to a healthy lateral.
Okay.
And so long term, you know, like 2 to 3 years from now, you might want it back a little bit further, because also we want to think about the height of the tree for picking fruit, and
especially the height of the Anne, which is not tall.
Well, and also the less time you can spend on the ladder, the better. My dad actually fell off a ladder picking apples this past summer and dealt with a fractured back for 3 months. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So ladder's bad. Cut your fruit trees low.
Great.
Is my philosophy now.
Great. Just go to town on it, man.
Okay. All right. So with these long, overextended branches, and if I'm working on the ground, if you just go and start making a cut, lots of times they can be too heavy, and kind of that concept of why they break in the first place, all that leverage at the end will go, and you'll lose control, and it'll end up peeling down and cause a lot of damage for the tree, and it looks really bad as well.
So like it'll pull the bark, and basically then that'll be unprotected?
Yeah, exactly. Cool. It looks bad, it's unprotected. So what you can do is called the 3-cut method. So you make 1 undercut, and sometimes you can get the saw pinched to that point, so you just don't want to do it too deep. Then you do an overcut. Watch out, Adam, it might fall on you.
There goes a whole peach tree.
Okay, and so then you're left with a stub, but you can just cut that stub off, and that way it doesn't end up peeling. And this is right where I always cut myself with these freaking saws.
Hence the glove.
Hence the glove, but also change where your hand is so you don't get cut by the saw. It's simple. It's simple,
Smart
Daniel.
man. This is like a whole peach tree, so goodbye, I guess.
We're gonna be merciless. All right, it's the same thing. I'll demo again. Do your undercut, and then for the top cut, the literature says to go past your bottom cut, but you can go on either side, and it doesn't really make a difference. Lots of times I'll go under, and it still snaps off.
Goodbye, peach tree.
And then change where your hand is so you don't cut yourself with the saw.
There we go.
And finish off the stub. And so for this one here, I'm trying to decide, just go ahead and take it here. See how that peeled? So I'm actually gonna do my final cut here, but that's an illustration of what happens if you don't do that 3-cut method. And sometimes that can travel all the way down a branch. I've had some things peel like up to 8 to 10 feet.
Yowza.
And that's a good way to make a client angry.
I guess I'll give my jerk goat some of these leaves to chew on. Oh no, a peach! It's okay, everything's fine. All right, you little jerks, here, enjoy. It's looking way more balanced already, but I mean,
Right.
it looks a little like heavy on that side still probably, yeah?
Yeah, so I think probably need to take some of the ends off of those branches growing over the fence. Also, there's some of those branches kind of on the fence that are rubbing.
Yeah.
It's up to you whether you like the goats playing with those or if you want to raise them off.
No, we might as well raise it off. Actually,
Okay.
the only reason I left them is because I was thinking we would do more trimming, and I was like, well, they're going to try to get it anyway. These are sacrifice limbs.
That's like watching Jurassic Park.
Oh, I
They're
know.
like vicious. All right, so the tree's starting to look more balanced.
Yep.
We have to take some of those low limbs and some of those long limbs off, but unlike the trees we did previously, there's not really any branches that could serve as a candidate for a central lead.
Yeah.
The structure of the tree is kind of set. So at this point, it's mitigating that kind of lever arm effect that these fruit trees tend to get, because again, they're always just gonna grow towards the light, like up and
Right.
out. So it's just a matter of bringing them down, you know,
To a normal level.
to a normal level, and also trying to get the branches so that they have an even branch spacing all the way down the branch.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, something like in bonsai they call that ramification stuff. So essentially you're just trying to make it so all these smaller branches down the branch have opportunities to grow bigger.
Sure.
And what that does is it distributes the weight more evenly so it doesn't have that same lever arm effect. And also like in windstorms and things like that, all those branches move at slightly different ways as the wind hits it.
Oh,
and
sure.
that dampens the effect down the branch so that essentially
Like it's a windbreak.
it's like a natural windbreak for the tree.
Interesting.
What you don't want to do and what you see people do oftentimes is they'll go down a branch and, you know, trying to thin the tree out, because lots of people, you know, thin fruit trees.
Guilty.
That is an important thing, like we talked about with some of the other trees, is getting those interior crossing branches taken care of. But they'll go through the interior
Just take all the little
and just
branches.
take all the little branches.
That's how I trimmed this tree last year. No one tell anyone.
And that's called line tailing. And what that does is it makes all the weight at the end of the branch so that when the wind hits it, it's all hitting that end, and it's all, you know, all the force is getting applied to these unions that are potentially already kind of weak. So we hear a lot about thinning fruit trees, and that leads to the biggest mistake most novice fruit tree owners have, and that is taking off too many branches, resulting in line tailing, which ultimately leads to the collapse of those branches when they're full of fruit. So if you look here, there's a lot of these branches growing up this lateral branch, and over time, if we allow those to grow more, we'll have fruit that is easy to reach, and we'll also have branches that are structurally stronger, because as those evenly spaced branches blow in the wind, they move at different rates, and it dampens the effect of strong winds. And it also allows the branches to hold more fruit without splitting or breaking. Shall we keep cutting?
Yes.
So especially this branch right here is resting on the fence, so I could probably just go ahead and cut it from the top.
Yep.
But with bigger branches, it's always just good habit to make a little cut on the bottom, a little stopper cut, and finish on the top. And then clean that stub off.
You know, as I'm watching those goats eat that, I actually just remembered something about stone fruit leaves and not wanting to give it to animals. So I'm just quickly going to Google, can goats eat peach tree leaves? Yeah, so they can be highly toxic. And here's an interesting thing is actually, so a lot of stone fruit leaves have cyanide in them, so we don't want to let them eat very much of it. But an interesting thing is that when animals have plenty of forage and plenty of feed, they won't be very likely to eat too much of anything that is actually harmful to them. Obviously, we don't want to make it too easy for them, so I'm going to go take those away. But you know, sometimes these animals will actually use the leaves of plants that have, you know, potentially toxic, harmful things in them to help manage their inside parasite loads. So that's actually why we plant cedar trees out in the pasture, so that they can rub the oils on themselves. It helps mitigate with flies and other bugs. And walnut leaves are another thing that's highly toxic, but it's actually something we intentionally have where they can browse to help them manage their internal parasites as well. So I'm not that worried because they're already full and they're basically just playing, but we're gonna take them away Anyway, I hope that learning how to take care of your fruit trees has inspired you to plant some of your own. And if you're looking for resources for how to do that, you can check them out on my Squarespace website. Daniel and I are working on an entire series, starting with planting your tree, to caring for your tree, to how to use a chainsaw, how to maintain your chainsaw, and then what do we do with the wood once we actually have to trim and take down our trees 20, 30, 40 years down the road. I hope you stay tuned for all of that. And if you are looking for resources to plant trees of your own, take care of them, check out my Squarespace website. I have been blogging there for 12 years, since the very beginning, when I was a city slicker who had no idea what I was doing, to now, when I'm still learning every day, but it's all been documented, and you can check it out, annofalltrades.com. Squarespace has been a fantastic resource for me. Someone who is not super tech savvy, to be able to easily drag and drop whatever I want to share with the world into a beautiful artist design template and then share it with the world. On Squarespace, I'm able to host my own online store, photo gallery, 12 years worth of articles about woodworking, homesteading, animal rearing, and everything in between. If you're looking to start a website of your own, check out Squarespace, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/annofalltrades for a 10% discount. Happy planting! Cheers!